Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Mac, and with me I have Gio.
What is good, everyone?
And of course, the beginning voice you heard was not Ray. Unfortunately, he's not here with us when we do our doubleheader podcast today. Just as a frame of reference for everybody, we're recording two podcasts today. One's going to be on the reaction to the FA Cup final where Manchester United won and proved that there is at least a small section of Manchester that's still a little bit red. And then in the second half of our podcast, it's going to be separated, is our preview for the Champions League final that for the 23-24 season. So please listen to both of that, and you'll definitely get all of our takes. And we'll definitely share maybe what Ray would have think based off both these games as well and give his initial thoughts. We'll just kind of be his microphone and speak for him a little bit. But before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on all our social media, which is house_of_footy on both Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and get in touch with us. We love hearing from you guys and want to make sure that you guys get involved. And that's houseoffooty@hotmail.com for any emails. But that being said, Gio, let's jump right into it. Manchester United won 2-1 against their arch rivals. Not really. Like second is like if you were to tier list the rivals for Manchester United, that's like fourth, like city rivals.
Like distant, you know. They weren't
Yeah.
really, much of
Like
a problem.
second cousin, challengers, or really is like it's like the fourth wave of like Sith and Star Wars. Anyway, that's a nerd take on me. Anyway, moving on. Gio, what's your initial takeaways from the FA Cup game today? What are your initial thoughts for Manchester United?
Wow. I think, it was the perfect day because they capitalized on all of City's mistakes. It was a lot of mistakes from City. And I want to preface by saying that a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, man, you played very well." Yes, they were more clinical in that sense, but it was because Man City made a lot of uncharacteristic like mistakes. And sometimes when you're fortunate, things like that happen. And on this day, Man United were fortunate. Even based on the first goal. How many times is he gonna make that mistake? And by hit, yeah, sorry, how do you pronounce his name? I don't want to
Guardiola?
put
Guardiola?
Guardiola.
Yeah.
How many times is he gonna make that mistake? Maybe he was too focused on offense as he was tearing it up, the weeks before. But yeah, it's just miscommunication between him and Ortega. Who's gonna get the ball, who's gonna get there first, and actually heads it over Ortega, and then leaves a wide open net for Garnacho to slot in the first goal. And from there, they were. I will say for Man U, they didn't really panic in a sense. Yes, Man City had a lot of their chances, but I think Man U were very comfortable with absorbing the pressure, sitting back, letting City have that possession. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, um, you have to be clinical. You have to be clinical. If you're not clinical, even if you are given these chances and opportunities, you can't do anything with them. So props to them for that. Obviously, with the Mainu goal as well from Bruno was very neatly played. Everybody, I think everybody and their moms thought Bruno was going to shoot from that position because in the past years we've seen him get selfish and just drill it from that spot, and it's skying it. So for him to be patient and to find Kobe right there was absolutely phenomenal.
I definitely think that's a great shout for Bruno Fernandes because even on the commentary, the talk was, it was a miss kick from Bruno versus no. That was a clear vision just to be able to pick out Kobe Mainu in that position and a first time finish that gives Really Otego no chance. So great quality from Manchester United there. And I think you did highlight as well in terms of they were fortunate on their own end. They did make mistakes in regards to Onana. I think overall had a good game, but it was kind of
Yeah.
an encapsulation of Onana's season where the easy save seems to be the most difficult and the most difficult save seems to be easy for him, which feels weird. And I know this may not be really fair, but he's just David De Gea with a little bit of better feet on his worst form in some ways, which again, at the end of the day, they won the game. You want to be able to give them credit. But I think the game was lost and won on two different aspects. I think it was a huge tactical mistake, which Pep Guardiola, why they ended up coming back into the game in the second half, but they lost the game in the first half, was the start of Kovacic. His positioning in that lineup for me didn't make a lot of sense if you, and I think Pep's thought process was where we're going to dominate a lot of the ball. They're going to try to hit us on the counter. Let's add an extra man in our midfield, someone to play alongside Rodri, to be able to make sure that in any of the counter situations we have an extra body there, and we even dominate enough of the ball where even though we may be losing a player in, let's say, our front five in a attacking sense, we should still be doing and be able to do enough against this Manchester United team, which has leaked goals over the last couple of weeks. That wasn't true. Kovacic was continuously out of play, not really effective, and there's fewer ways for them to be able to break down the lines of Manchester United. And I think that was a tactical mistake that he made, and of course set them back early on in the game, and I would argue cost them the game. On the other side, it further enhanced what I would Ten Hag strategy in terms of we're going to bench the striker that I signed, who I would argue has been one of the better players this season for them. To just pack the midfield as much as possible, and specifically their left hand side, which is City's right hand side, where that's a spot where Bernardo Silva and Foden would generally like to link a lot of play. Let's pack that up, make sure McTominay's there, Bruno Fernandes there, and it really felt like a whole. Correct me if I'm wrong if I'm getting my shapes incorrectly. Like a trapezoid, that's the long and the two short sides, and then the shorter one on top. You know what I'm saying? There's like a trapezoid above their box where they were so packed and congested, City weren't really be able to break them down. When they did, and they're focused specifically on Manchester United's left-hand side defense, when the ball was switched over, it was Guardiola, who we've seen over recent weeks get in the box to score some phenomenal goals. But instead of him picking up the ball just outside the 18, it was 40 yards away, and he is then now driving in like a secondary phase against a Garnacho or a Mainu. And in all likelihood, he's not going to break them down. If you give him a whole lot of space in the 18, yeah, he has some quality, but I don't think he's necessarily a creator or someone that wants to be able to drop a ball into the box. So Manchester United, by packing the midfield, specifically the defensive left-hand side, really exposed City's least creative player on the pitch. And in the whole of the first half, where Man United won the game, really, that's what really set the difference between these two teams. So for me, it was a failure on Pep's side, but also a success on Ten Hag's. In regards to that, Gio, is that in regards to this individual game, I don't mean to jump to the end, but this result, how do you feel this is going to impact Manchester United in the off season? Do you foresee Ten Hag staying now because he has back-to-back seasons of cup success, 3 finals across the board? Does the Ineos give him more of an opportunity? What would you think they're going to do, and what will you do?
I think ultimately, they will give them. I don't know, because it's tough. Because does one game really determine whether you should stay or not? It's kind of in a similar sense, kind of like the Chelsea situation. Yes, Poch had a good run of form, but why was it only now that you were able to kind of pick up your pace and really get the boys going when your job was on the line? So I think the same thing applies. But again, we do have to take in consideration that, like he said in many of the post-match interviews, he's only had the full squad that they envisioned maybe 2, 3, 4 times tops in the last 2 years. So the string of injuries that he's had, quite unlucky. I don't know how much that's going to play into a factor in the Ineos decision, whether they want to keep him or not. But that is the fact. That is the case. What was it unfortunate for him? Yes. Did he kind of make do with what he had? Yes. And then at the end of the day, did he really achieve what they wanted? Yes and no. They got European football. Wasn't Champions League football, but got European football. Was it the traditional way in terms of finishing in the top 6 of the table, top 5 of the table? No, it was actually, in hindsight, kind of nice because you went out there and won a cup as well. It was the double whammy of it all. There's going to be a lot of talk this summer, but I think, given the circumstances, I think after this victory, I think they have a little bit more buy-in in him. And it'll be a little tougher of a decision. Ultimately, I think he does go. If he does stay, would I be mad? No, because again, he's never had a full squad. to his name quite that often. So who knows what he can do with a full squad, and can he really get the players buy-in now that he's proven that, if you guys trust me, I can win and I can win you trophies.
I think that's a fair point. I look. It's tough for me because I can look at it from either side. Yeah, he injuries galore, and I would argue his best signing has missed. I would argue almost the entire year, Lisandro Martinez. Right. I think in terms of anyone else he's brought in, it's him above and better than the rest. And we've really only seen a full season from him, and that was last year. So him coming onto the pitch today, and Pep Guardiola came out and said after the game is we're talking about one of the best center backs in the world, and he was kind of the difference that they were not kind of game planning for, and maybe should have taken into account. However, I look at on the other side, Klopp, when he was coaching Liverpool, that famous side that they had with like Ronaldo, Jordan Henderson, and reached the Champions League final, that their best 11 played one game together, right? So it's the Premier League. It's professional football. You're going to have injuries. But do you kind of quibble over the amount of injuries, or to which players got injuries? Do you give them enough time? I don't know. And what leaves me even a little bit more concerned for him is what happened with Pochettino. I do agree with you, Gio. It was really just the end of the season that Chelsea played really well. But it seemed like things were coming together. And why not continue to let that wave ride, right? Where you're progressing, you're building. A lot of the young players came out and said they were very surprised about Pochettino leaving. So I was surprised about that decision. Is this going to come around after winning a trophy and he still gets fired? I think that's a tough look. Again, but on the other side, and which you highlighted in terms of just notes for the talk, for the podcast today, is this good or bad for Manchester United? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But for me, I think, again, similarly to it could go either way. I know I don't mean to give you a flip-flop answer, but for Manchester United, I think going into European football just as a standard, getting into competition, giving more opportunity to drive more revenue, that's great. However, I look at it on the other side as well. Is now they're going to have a couple of people leaving. I think Varane's leaving. I think Wan-Bissaka's leaving. I think there's a couple other players that look to be almost confirmed to be gone as well. And now there's talk of also Casemiro going to like MLS or something like that, right? Or the Saudi League. That means you now need to not just buy 2 or 3 more players to replace them. You need to buy a bigger squad. So if these injuries come up, you can sustain them. But now, what does that mean? You still have the same budget of, let's say, whatever the budget is. Let's say if it's 200 million. There's been talks of that being invested in the squad this summer. Now you need to spread that across 8 players instead of 3. So by logic of that, you're not getting as high quality of players you may need to compete at the higher level. So it's tough either way you look at it. I think, and that's for me why more so last year, and I think I had at the beginning of the season, it would have been better than if he had this season last year and last year's season this year. Then I think everyone would be like, oh, everything's on the up and up. Things are progressing. Things are getting better. It's about setting that lower standard first and rebuilding the team. And I, again, selfishly always compare it, maybe from my bias, I compare it to Arteta. His first couple of years for Arsenal, very, very shaky. Got that FA Cup under his belt, though. Allowed him to build from the bottom and really invest in the team. And it seems like Ten Hag took 2 steps forward and then 1 step back this year. Is very interesting to see, though, is that with European football, does that potentially put him further behind the 8 ball, or does that give him more opportunities for success, right? And this year, European football didn't work so well for them. I'm very interested to see what are your thoughts on that? Is it a blessing or a curse that they, let's say, take away winning the cup? If you had the choice as a Man United fan, you get the cup, you win that. Do you want them to play in European football next year?
So I think it's a double-edged sword, but I do think you have to play in European football if given the opportunity. I think that's the only way you really can attract the top talent, albeit your Europa League. But this is how you are gonna. So maybe you're not gonna attract the top A-list players that all these big clubs are gunning for, but you'll be able to kind of pick at the A minus to B plus type players that are looking for that breakthrough, that are looking to get to that bigger club and prove themselves, continually prove themselves, and by that I mean, they're able to maybe look at within the league and kind of pillage these lower clubs for their top players, and go to Europe and find these players that are kind of struggling but looking for that breakthrough again, and looking for a fresh start. Those are the type of players they're going to be looking for. There'll be a variety. Much not to say much like the Ericsson signing, they're looking to sign players like Ericsson, but obviously a little bit younger and a little bit more to add to the squad depth. But again, it's important that they are continually in European football, so that if they do succeed, players are going to continually wanting to still play for this crest that has been struggling for quite some time. Players such as Adrian Rabiot, who is now a free agent, who has been constantly linked with United. You know, with Casemiro leaving, do they make that push for him now? Is this more important than ever to make a signing like for Rabiot? Because is he garnering attention from the top clubs of the world? Not necessarily. But is he still class enough to compete in, say, a Europa League or in the Premier League? I do think so. So I think, given the opportunities, I think Man U are going to go for players of that stature who are struggling a little bit, looking for a fresh start, but have proven themselves in the past and just kind of in a rough spot.
I think that's a fair shout. I think, at least for me, if I'm them, what's driven most success under any Manchester United management, and if you look at their players, it's their youth development. And if you can find some way to bridge that gap with a couple of signings with some leadership, but players like Diallo, players like Garnacho, players like Kobe Manu, if you're able to continue to be able to find maybe a couple more of those, maybe you're the team instead of Crystal Palace signing Adam Morton. Maybe you're the team that signs this summer's version of Adam Morton to be able to come in and to be able to play in midfield and help foster growth. And maybe those more game opportunities give more, like I said, opportunities for their players to play instead of just kind of I would say, the lackluster kind of casual starter first team that generally Manchester United does have for some of these
Yeah.
top players, and slowly, hopefully, you can phase more of those players out. But we spent a lot of time talking about Manchester United. There was the loser of this game, Manchester City. Let's spend a little couple minutes on them, and then we'll be able to wrap up this part of the podcast, Gio. So for them, my question to you is: this season for them a failure? They've won the Premier League. That's it. Of the four, they lost the Community Shield to Arsenal. I don't know any other major competition that they're in, like a Cup World Cup. I don't know about that. Don't really care about that. I'll be honest with you. But the other ones that they talk about, of course, that's always brought up, are the FA Cup, the Champions League, and the Carabao Cup. So they are one trophy this year. Is this a bad look for Manchester City after winning the treble last year? Is this, of course, they were successful in the season. They had to win on the last day, though. It's not as if it was a free and clear for majority of the season. What are your thoughts on them? Do you think that this defeat changes what maybe Pep's approach would be with the team this summer, or even does Pep continue to stay on?
Okay, so this is an interesting situation with them because they're so used to domination. They're so used to having control of the league early on and throughout the season. But to answer your question, do I see it as a failure? Yes. And let me tell you why. Because a lot of managers, a lot of ex players would be like, "Oh, I'd be ecstatic to just win the Prem, ecstatic to just win the league." That would be a success for many clubs at this point. But to the standard that they have been held, no. And let me tell you why. I think because they have won three in a row, I think they would easily have, if given the opportunity, the ultimatum to trade their Premier League title won this year for a Champions League title won this year. I think they would happily make that change. One, Champions League probably gets you a little bit more money. Two, they haven't really convincingly won a Champions League final to the point where they said, okay, this is pure domination. You are Europe's finest club. And there is no comparison to you guys. They haven't reached that level. Other clubs have been in that level where they have been kind of almost untouchable. So, and they have not won it back to back. So, with that being said, I think if Pep was given the ultimatum to trade his Premier League title win this year for a Champions League title win this year, I think he would take that in a heartbeat because he's proven it in the Prem. He has nothing left to prove in the Prem. He's literally here for the vibes at this point. Do I think he should have left this year? Maybe, because you're gonna have to rebuild the team some way somehow, or maybe he's convinced KDB to stay one more year so they can make that one last push prior to him sailing off to the sunset into the North American realm or maybe the Saudi realm. And then Pep will leave and allow Man City to kind of rebuild because I don't think he wants to be a part of the rebuild. But to answer that, I think it is a failure this year.
I think that's fair because when he talked about one thing that he talked about a lot in regards to after winning the Premier League title was them chasing history. So the 4 in a row, I think that's history. But the second part is like, okay, now in a couple of days we have chance for history again as the as the first potential Premier League team to both win the double, a Premier League and FA Cup in back-to-back seasons. That's never happened before. So for them losing that period that they're chasing is now gone. So of course they can't win a back-to-back double next year because they didn't get the double this year, so that's gone. The really only character chase is okay. Do we add another Premier League, go 5 in a row, and a second Champions League? Those are again the hardest competitions to be able to win. I would argue. So it's. I do agree with you in terms of that part of being a failure, as well as especially after his press conferences where he has 1 more year left in his contract and he's tired, kind of tired, and doesn't see himself staying on much longer than that probably, but he'll address it next year. Again, completely fair. He really has the right to be able to pick and choose any job in the world he wants, and anyone would be happy to get him. But I think it seems like kind of the horses run the race in this aspect where this might have been the final hurrah, a great hurrah for Premier League titles in a row. Like I said, never been done before, but it seems like that may be all she wrote for this era of Manchester City. After, of course, what may happen next season. Who knows? Maybe someone lights a fire under his ass, or Arteta tries to fight him, or Arne Slot tries to say something nasty about Pep's family, and that just reignites his emotions and keeps him back into it. I'm skeptical of both those things, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win or lose next year.
Right.
That's all she wrote. But that being said, that's all she wrote for this part of today's podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe on our social medias. That's at House of _ Footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general answer, get in touch with us at houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will actually be in a couple of days, but you and I will be back here in a couple of minutes. So please stay tuned. Can't wait to hear from you. With that being said, that's peace out for me and Gio.
Glory, glory.